my name is Chantal and welcome back to my channel. So for this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the books I have read in October. Now, I don't know about you, but I am horrified at how quick October went. I cannot believe it is now November and we only have 2 months left of 2022. The weather has changed, it is freezing and I love it. I go into full hibernation mode. I just stay in, read books, get cozy, and I absolutely love it. So this month I read 7 books. So a few of these books I have covered in more detail in reading vlogs, etc. I won't go into too much detail with those ones. But the first book I read in October was East of Eden. Now, although I said that October went so quickly, I do feel like I read this book absolutely ages ago. And I also feel like I've spoken about it quite a lot. It now features in my 5-star book recommendations. So you can tell by that how much I loved it. It's about 2 families, the Trusts and the Hamiltons, living in America. It's a whole big saga talking about their whole lives. Yeah, I've spoken about this book quite a lot, so I won't go into any more detail about it, but I just loved hearing about both of the families' lives as they get older, hearing about their children, and like I said, there is the worst villain I've ever read in this book, so I highly recommend it. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars for this one. Then the second book I read in October, I wanted to read a spooky book, so I picked up this one, Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, and I really liked this book. I read it in one evening because it was one of those books where it just builds up so much and you just need to know what happens immediately. So it's about a woman called Rosemary, and her husband move into their dream flat in their dream apartment building in New York. There has been some stories of quite a few deaths in the building, but they just sort of think like, oh, it's a coincidence, like, doesn't matter, we love this flat so much, so let's just go for it. And Rosemary is dying for a baby. She wants to get pregnant so badly, she wants to start a family with her husband. So they move in and it's all going swimmingly. And Rosemary's husband becomes really good friends with their elderly neighbours. She doesn't think too much about it, but then she gets pregnant, and that is when things start to get weird and scary and spooky, and you need to know what happens immediately. So I love this book for that. Like I said, I read it in one evening because I had to know what happened. I think I gave this book a 3 stars, just a good, solid book. It wasn't like groundbreaking for me. I thought it was a really good, solid Halloween spooky book. So for that, I really liked it. So then my third book that I read was this one, Treacle Walker by Alan Garner. I picked this one up after I read The Trees by Percival Everett, which was on the shortlist for the Booker Prize, and this one was longlisted for the Booker Prize, so I thought I'd give another Booker nominated book a go. Do I want to say book one more time? This book is a weird one. I read a lot of reviews and they all say sort of the same thing. There's lots of like folklore in this, and I think that just goes over my head. There's lots of this book that I know went over my head and I didn't understand. It feels like a really dreamlike book with lots of philosophical questions that you could ponder for hours, which I liked. You don't really know what's real and what's not. So Joseph, the main character, wears an eye patch. And when he takes the eye patch off, it sort of reveals like another world almost, like an alternate reality. He can see more than when he has the eye patch on. And so you don't really know what's real and what's not. So yeah, like I said, it does feel really dreamlike. The old man, Treacle Walker, talks in lots of rhymes and riddles. So it feels like a fairy tale almost, but I do feel like I wish it was maybe a bit longer. It does feel very like scattered, and I don't know if that's meant to reflect like Joseph's inner mind, his scattered feelings, but I do wish that some scenes were just given a bit more attention and a bit more time, because there was points where I was reading it and I was like, oh gosh, we moved on already. Like I was a bit getting whiplash from how much it was changing, and I do feel like it could have done with a bit more explanation and points, and I think that would have made me more invested in the story. I think there is beauty in this sort of unknown and whimsical feeling of it, where sometimes you don't really sure what's going on or where he is. So there was pros and cons to that. So I did like this book. I think you sort of have to almost suspend your disbelief and just go with it and just be taken into the story. Like, if you want to fully understand the story from the get-go, I think you'll be disappointed. But if you just want to let yourself go into this sort of like dreamlike, whimsical sort of book and just let yourself go into it, then I think you could like it. I think I gave this book a 3 stars, so a good book. I think it could have been a bit better though, with just a bit more explanation and just a bit more fleshing out of the story. So then my 4th book I read, I'm not sure where it is because I took it to London with me on the train and I can't seem to find it, but it was called Diary of a Void. It's about a woman who has sort of like just a mundane, ordinary life, works in an office, but she is sick and tired of all the male expectations that come with working in the office. She is the only female who works there, and she is expected to make all the coffees, do all the cleaning, just basically do all like the office admin stuff that the men are incapable of doing apparently, and she is sick of it. So one day when she is cleaning up all the coffee cups, as she always does, she's had enough. So she says, "No, I can't do that, sorry." And they ask why. And she says that because she's pregnant and the smell of the coffee makes her feel sick. Of course, she's not pregnant. So she has to keep up this story that she is pregnant. And obviously, as the months go on, she has to put a bump under her t-shirt. She has to make up these stories about her being pregnant and sort of keep up appearances with it. But this story is really all about loneliness. The main character is extremely lonely. She lives by herself, doesn't seem to have any friends really. So with this false pregnancy, she actually makes a lot of human connections and has a lot of human interactions which she wouldn't have had before. She goes to aerobics for pregnant women and makes loads of friends there. A person at work becomes really interested in her life and really invested in her life. And I thought that was a really strong element of the story. The discussions around loneliness in your adult life. I also really loved the descriptions of just like your everyday life. Like she just goes to the supermarket and it discusses that. But where the book fell flat for me was there was lots of biblical references, because obviously she's saying she's pregnant and she's not. There's lots of references to the Virgin Mary. And for me, they felt a bit on the nose, a bit heavy-handed. They didn't really land with me. And I felt like that heavy-handedness really contrasted with the sort of soft, everyday, mundane life that she was describing. And they just didn't merge for me. So this book was okay, it was fine. I did not like it. And if you do like reading about that sort of everyday, mundane life, going to the shops, going to your office job, then I do recommend it for that, because it did have some really great moments in it. I just thought those biblical references were just a bit heavy-handed for me. The next book I read this month was this one, The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, and I loved this book. It's a hefty one, so it did take me a while to get through, but I absolutely loved it. Again, like Easter Eden, it's like a whole sort of saga book, like talking about the main character, Marion, her whole life, which I really like because I get so invested in these characters and I just missed them so much when I stopped reading about them. So this is about a girl called Marion, and as a young girl, she has always dreamed of becoming a pilot. But growing up in the 1930s, she was always held back and people said that she couldn't do it. And this talks about how she has managed to become a pilot. She goes against people's expectations of her. She's so strong-willed, and I loved hearing about her life so much. She has a twin brother as well, and it talks about his life as he grows up to be an artist and how they drift apart and come together. And as well as this, there's also another narrative going on in the present day of a famous actress who is acting out the life of Marion, because Marion's story sort of gains traction. So like I said, she's a pilot and she tries to fly around the whole world, but her plane goes missing. And so this story gains some traction. There is a book written about her and she's sort of become a celebrity in her disappearance. So this actress in the current day is acting as her in a film. But it's interesting because the present day actress and Marion herself have a lot of similarities. And this actress has sort of lost her way. She's young, she's trying to find herself. And it's about how she finds out about Marion's life and how this then in turn affects her life and her decisions. And the two narratives sort of interweave in that way. I definitely preferred Marion's storyline the most. It was just so interesting, but I think that's how it was intended to be. I still like the other narrative of the actress as well, but Marian's story is just so strong. I just loved hearing about her. So I think I give this book 4 stars, but it's a 4.5, I would say. I really, really love this book a lot. Then the next book I read is The Island of Missing Trees by Alicia Fack. I did talk about this book quite a lot in my last reading vlog, so if you want to hear more about it, go and watch that. But this is about a young girl called Ada living in London, but her parents are from Cyprus. Her dad is Greek Cypriot, her mum is Turkish Cypriot, and they grew up in the 1970s when there was serious wars between the Greek and the Turkish. And this is 2 narratives going on. It's talking about how her parents met back in the 1970s, how their love blossomed, how it was sort of like Romeo and Juliet style forbidden love. And then in the present day with Ada. I found this book so interesting, hearing about the war in Cyprus in the 1970s. It's something that I didn't really know anything about, to be honest. So I found it really interesting to hear about this. There was so many references to wildlife and trees. Ada's dad is, I can't remember his job, but it's to do with trees and wildlife. So I loved hearing about that. Some of this book is narrated by a fig tree, which I found really interesting. I loved hearing about the fig tree's life. They actually lived a very exciting life. They've lived in different countries. So I loved hearing about that. I really like this book a lot. But yeah, if you want to hear more in detail stuff, go and watch my last reading vlog. But I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was great. And then the final book that I read this month was Fresh Water by Akwaeke Emezi. And again, this was in my last reading vlog, so go and watch that if you want to hear more in-depth review on it. But I thought this book was outstanding. It's a debut novel, but what an accomplishment for a debut novel. It is absolutely heartbreaking, relentlessly so. But I found it such an interesting delve into mental illness. I found that so just interesting to hear about. It talks a lot about trauma, sexual assault, self-harm, so do not read it if that will affect you. It is extremely sad. It's about a young girl, again called Ada, and the same as The Island of Missing Trees. But Ada was born in Nigeria and then moved to America, and she suffers with mental illness. It's these sorts of alternate personalities living inside of her head that after she experiences severe trauma take over her body and determine her actions and how she lives her life, and it's her constant daily struggle with it. So this book is really tough to read, but so amazingly written in my opinion. And I feel like Akwaeke Emezi really writes in a way that I've not really seen before. It feels intricate and so well thought out. So I really did enjoy this book a lot. But yeah, just a warning, if you are thinking of reading it, it is extremely sad. So just brace yourself for that if you're wanting to read it. So they are all the books that I read this month. I think I had quite a good reading month, seeing as I had quite a few books in there that were quite hefty. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Do let me know if you read any of these books and what you thought of them, and I will see you in my next video.